Let's talk Notion for Teams. So using Notion as a team brings a whole new set of challenges with it that require some additional kind of structures and thought processes so that you don't end up with a huge mess and lots of chaos. And in this video, we'll take a look at how you can actually do that. The first tip is to keep the number of workspaces low. Now, this might be a really obvious tip and you might think, well, obviously, but some people think that, for example, different teams should have different Notion workspaces. But in general, I'd say that no matter how big your company is, you usually only need one workspace or maybe a couple, but I would usually always try to keep it in one workspace because expanding across different workspaces just means having a huge mess, and some things might be in one workspace, some things might be in other workspaces. So yeah, keep the number of workspaces to an absolute minimum. One should be enough for pretty much every company out there. The next tip is to keep the number of admins low, and this obviously makes sense as well. It gets more and more important the larger your organization gets, and it's basically the same thing as it is with your website and your server and any other tool that you use in your company. The more admins you have, the more risk you have of some password getting compromised or maybe social engineering attacks on one of your team members. So yeah, always keep the number of admin accounts very low because you don't want things to get deleted by accident or someone messing around with your workspace. Another great tip for teams working in Notion is to use comments to collaborate and to communicate with team members. Because usually it's better if you communicate directly where you are actually working. So if you're working on a blog post, then you're working and communicating directly on that blog post, which makes it easier to tell others what you're actually talking about and so on. So often that is the best way of communicating, and that's what I recommend for teams in Notion to do as well. If you have a page in Notion that you want to stay up to date with, a great tip is to use the direct Slack integration, which allows you to connect a Notion page to a Slack channel. And that way, every Notion page update on that page will be directly sent to that Slack channel so that you can follow along with what's happening in Notion right from your Slack account. So that is a really nice feature. Some people like to use it. I personally like to keep the number of notifications I get to a minimum, so I don't personally use it, but other people might still enjoy using it. As a team in Notion, you also want to set up a good permission structure. So that means using the Notion user groups feature. And that's something that I would highly recommend to any company and any team using Notion, because it just makes it so much easier for you to handle the access to different pages and different parts of your Notion workspace. A good rule of thumb for this is to create one group for every kind of function in your business. So again, one for marketing, one for sales, one for support, one for admin, one for engineering, and so on. And if you get to a bigger level, if you have maybe hundreds of different employees and you want to make the controls and the permissions a bit more fine-grained, then you can actually set up multiple groups per function in your business. So you could have an engineering juniors, an engineering senior, and like an engineering executive group, and then give permission to those groups to make it easier for you to handle who can do what in your workspace. And lastly, a great tip to limit the number of involuntary changes made to your database. You can actually lock databases as an admin so that nobody else can actually change anything about them. They can only add new entries and they can only delete the existing entries, but nobody in the workspace can make changes to properties, can rearrange properties and things like this. To do that, go to a database and then click on the menu and click on Lock Database. And now you see this database is locked. I can just open pages, but I can't click into these different properties. I can't add existing like new properties. I can't move anything around. So we can only use this to actually get work done, but we couldn't delete any of these views or stuff like that. This also works for regular pages. So this might also sometimes be a great option, especially if you have like a dashboard or things like that you don't want to change that often. So here on our homepage, again, same thing, go in here, go to lock page. And now you see we can't do anything about this. We can click on links, but I couldn't go in here and delete this. So the page is locked and we can't edit any of the content without unlocking the database again. That's it for this video. In the next one, we'll take a look at Notion keyboard shortcuts.